There was once a woman who wished very much to have a little child, but she could not obtain her wish. At last she went to a fairy witch and said, "I should so very much like to have a little child. Can you tell me where I can find one?" "Oh, that can be easily managed," said the fairy. "Here is a seed of a barley corn. Put it into a flower pot and see what will happen." The woman went home and planted it, and immediately there grew up a large handsome flower, something like a tulip in appearance, but with its leaves tightly closed as if it were still a bud. The woman kissed the red and golden-colored leaves, and while she did so, the flower opened. Within the flower sat a very delicate and graceful little maiden. She was scarcely half as long as a thumb, and that's why she got the name of Thumbelina, or tiny, because she was so small. A walnut shell served her for a cradle, with a rose leaf for a blanket. But one night, while she lay in her pretty bed, a large, ugly frog crept in through a broken window. "What a pretty little wife this would make for my son," said the frog, grabbed the walnut shell in which little Tiny lay asleep, and jumped through the window into the garden to meet her son. He was uglier even than his mother, and when he saw the pretty little maiden in her elegant bed, he could only cry, "Rock, rock, rock!" "Don't speak so loud or she will wake," said the mother frog, "and then she might run away. We will place her on one of the water lily leaves out in the stream. It will be like an island to her, and then she cannot escape. And we will prepare the stateroom under the marsh in which you are to live when you are married." The tiny little creature woke very early in the morning and began to cry bitterly when she found where she was, for she could see nothing but water on every side of the large green leaf, and no way of reaching the land. The little fishes who swam about in the water beneath had seen the frog and heard what she was planning. They felt very sorry to think that Tiny must go and live with the ugly frogs. No, it must never be. They assembled together round the green leaf on which the little maiden stood, and teared it away at the root with their teeth. The leaf floated down the stream, carrying Tiny far away, past many towns, and when the little birds in the bushes saw her, they sang, "What a lovely little creature, oh, so neat and tender." Presently a large cockchafer flew by. The moment he caught sight of her, he seized her round her delicate waist with his claws, and flew with her into a tree. He seated himself by her side on a large green leaf, gave her some honey from the flowers to eat, and told her she was very pretty. After a time, all the cockchafers gathered around and whispered, "She has only 2 legs. Her waist is so slim. She's like a human being. She's ugly." And they all flew away. During the whole summer, poor little Tiny lived quite alone in the wide forest. She sucked the honey from the flowers for food, and drank the dew from their leaves every morning. So passed away the summer and the autumn, and all the birds who had sung to her so sweetly were flown away. She felt dreadfully cold, for her clothes were torn. That poor little Tiny was nearly frozen to death. It began to snow, too, when she reached at last to the door of a field mouse.
You poor little creature, come into my warm room and dine with me. You are quite welcome to stay with me all the winter, but you must keep my rooms clean and neat, and tell me stories, for I shall like to hear them very much.
And lucky Tiny did all the field mouse asked her, and found herself very comfortable.
We shall have a visitor soon, said the field mouse one day. My neighbor pays me a visit once a week. He's very rich and learned, and his house is 20 times larger than mine. If you could only have him for a husband, you would be well provided for indeed. But he's blind.
Yes, the mole was rich and learned and blind, and had dug a long passage under the earth, which led from the dwelling of the field mouse to his own, and Mouse had permission to walk with Tiny whenever she liked. But he warned them not to be alarmed at the sight of a dead bird which lay in the passage. Yes, in the middle of the floor lay a dead swallow, evidently died of the cold. When the two others had turned their backs on the bird and walked on, Tiny kissed the swallow's closed eyelids. Perhaps this was the one who sang to me so sweetly in the summer, and how much pleasure it gave me, you dear pretty bird. Then she laid her head on the bird's breast, but she was alarmed immediately, for it seemed as if something inside the bird went tum, tum, tum. It was the bird's heart. He was not really dead yet. Tiny trembled. She was quite frightened, for the bird was large, and she was only an inch high. But she took courage, laid some wool over the poor swallow, brought some water in a flower leaf, and some food, and the whole winter the swallow remained underground, and Tiny nursed him with care and love. When springtime came, the swallow wasn't strong enough to dry his wings. "Farewell, then, farewell, you good-bred little maiden," said the swallow. Sang the bird as he flew out into the green woods, and Tiny felt very sad.
You are going to be married, Tiny, said the field mouse. Mr. Mole has asked for you.
Then Tiny wept and said she would not like to marry.
Nonsense, replied the field mouse. I shall bite you with my white teeth. He's a very handsome mole. The queen herself does not wear more beautiful velvets and furs.
So the wedding day was fixed, on which the mole was to fetch Tiny away, to live with him deep under the earth, and never again to see daylight, the warm sun, because he did not like it. At least the field mouse gave her permission to stand last time at the door. "Farewell, bright sun," Tiny cried. "Greet the little swallow from me." Sounded over her head suddenly. She looked up, and there was the swallow himself flying close by. As soon as he spied Tiny, he was delighted. "Cold winter is coming, and I'm going to fly away into warmer countries. Will you go with me?" "Yes, yes," cried Tiny. And the swallow rose with her in the air, and flew over forest and over sea, high above the highest mountains, covered with eternal snow. At length they reached the warm countries, where the sun shines brightly, and the sky seems so much higher above the earth. At last they came to a palace of dazzling white marble. Vines clustered round its lofty pillars, and at the top were many swallows' nests. "And this is my house, but it would not do for you to live there. You would not be comfortable." So the swallow flew down with Tiny and placed her on one of the broad leaves. But how surprised she was to see in the middle of the flower a tiny little man, as white and transparent as if he had been made of crystal. He had a gold crown on his head and delicate wings at his shoulders, and was not much larger than Tiny herself. He took the gold crown from his head and placed it on hers, and asked her name, and if she would be his wife and queen over all the flowers. This certainly was a very different sort of husband to the son of a frog or the mole, and so she said, "Yes," to the handsome prince. Then all the flowers opened, and out of each came a little lady or a tiny lord. Each of them brought Tiny a present, but the best gift was a pair of beautiful wings. "You must not be called Tiny any more," said the prince. "It is an ugly name, and you are so very pretty. We will call you Maya." "Farewell, farewell," said the swallow, with a heavy heart as he left the warm countries to fly back into Denmark. There he had a summer nest over the window of a house in which dwelt a writer of fairy tales. The swallow sang, and from his song came the whole story.